Well, let's go ahead and get started. And thanks for coming to class today, Garrick, Everett, Ben, Matthew, and Emma. And maybe a few other people will come. If not, I will post this recording on the messages update thing on ManageBack. I just want to check in, see how everyone's doing. If you guys had any major questions about your projects last week, I have not graded them all yet. I've just started going through some of them. Some people submitted it through ManageBack, some people emailed it to me. Either of those options are totally fine. So I should have those graded probably tomorrow, I would think. I'll get them graded. And I'll just put your grades on ManageBack. So if anybody has any questions about any of that, let me know now-ish. Hopefully everyone's good. Okay.
Wait, I have one question.
Yes, go Everett.
So if we did it in a Google slide and we typed our sort of notes or like what we were going to say in the note section, you know, like under slide.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like, and you turn that into ManageBack, will that still be there? Okay.
Oh, good question. Let's go look at yours right now if you don't mind. Let's go look at it. Everett. Let's see what comes up. It appears as if it is not there. So go ahead and email that to me, Everett.
Okay.
Because let me see if I can download it, but I think it's going to be a PDF as well. Yeah, it looks like I really hate ManageBack for a lot of reasons. It looks like it's just the slides. That's super annoying. I'm sorry. So if anybody else did the same thing, feel free to email it to me because it obviously is not there. I'll send out an email to everybody as well to remind them to just send it to me in my email because it looks like it converted everything to PDF. Oh, why do we use ManageBack? It's frustrating to me sometimes. I know why, but anyways. So I'll send out an email to remind everybody to just send it to me. I'm sorry about that, guys. I don't always know how these platforms are going to mess things up. Okay. Good question, though, Everett. Thank you for checking on that. Let's jump right into our final speech. This is the big summative that we're working towards. In fact, I am going to edit this right now because they want us to make sure that it's in the same format for everything. There we go. Okay. So this is your final speech, and this is a music analysis speech. And if you just read this information, it's going to be a little bit confusing, which is why I'm really happy that you're here in class today because we're going to be going over this and I'm going to be posting some additional resources. Remember to check the messages tab. I have also posted the last week recording and some other information. I don't think I shared the resources with you, so I'll do that as well. So let's go back to our final speech info. So the basic stuff that you need to know is this is a speech. You do not need to turn in anything written for the speech, and there are no visual aids required. Yay! I just need you to either sign up for a day to present with me one-on-one or record yourself and send me the video, okay, of you analyzing your song. So there's nothing written that needs to be turned in, and you don't need to have any visual aid. In fact, it's better if you don't have a visual aid. I just want to see your beautiful face giving your speech, okay? The time limit for this speech is roughly 4 to 7 minutes, and you can choose to analyze any song that you want. You are welcome to play a clip of the song during your speech. and you can play up to 30 seconds, just enough to give a little snippet. You don't need to play the whole song, and you don't actually have to play the song at all if you don't want to. You can also have your whole script written out, or you can just do note cards or an outline. However you want to present is fine. I don't need any slides or anything like that. This section here is just the criteria that you are evaluated on: analyzing, organizing, and using language. So let's talk about what it is that you're doing for this speech, because this is the content piece that's going to be the most confusing, and I want to make sure that we walk through it very carefully, and that's why this class, as well as our other Zoom class next week, is so important. I'm also going to be sending you lectures that I recorded last semester that go into even more detail on the 5 considerations. So your speech is going to be going to consist of an introduction. You must address all 5 considerations. So you're going to have 5 body paragraphs roughly, and a conclusion. Some of these considerations, because there's 5 instead of what we would normally do with like 3 body paragraphs, 1 or 2 of them might be a little bit shorter, whereas 1 or 2 might be a little bit longer. Okay. These 5 considerations are called historical backdrop, immediate context, linguistic set, medium ethos, and audience perspective. These are all kind of big words, and so we're going to go through exactly what each of these 5 considerations is, what those words mean, and what exactly it is that you're supposed to do. Before we do that though, I want to just give like a bigger overview of what it means to actually analyze something. So whether you are analyzing a song or a piece of literature or an electronic device of some sort, the first step is that you have to break it down into smaller pieces. So if I didn't know what this magical device was, and I was trying to figure it out as I drop it on my desk, the first step is to figure out all the individual parts, right? Maybe I would physically take it apart. Since it's a smart device and I'm interacting with it, I would have to figure out what all of those parts are first. So the first piece is breaking it down. I am basically doing the breakdown part for you by separating things into these 5 considerations. These can be thought of as like 5 different lenses to look at the object through. Breaking it down, and then we have to identify those different parts, okay? The next step is to briefly figure out how those parts work together. This is the step that most people are really, really good at. Most students, when they do this speech, they are really good at telling me what pieces and parts are in the song, and you're really good at explaining like what those parts do. For example, if we take a moment to just look at linguistic set, this consideration is all about the lyrics, or if you choose a song with no lyrics. Then if you are when you're doing this consideration, you're looking at the lyrics. What kind of devices are used? What kinds of words is the artist using? Are they using a lot of imagery or metaphor? These are things that people are pretty good about identifying, and a lot of students can tell me, oh, this artist uses a lot of metaphor here, they're using a lot of repetition here. Maybe you choose a song with really strong language that might be considered offensive language, and you can even say, oh, this artist is using this strong language here, here, and here. Or maybe the artist is using really simple language. Identifying those things is the really easy part, and even talking about what the purpose of those devices are. You can say, oh, well, the metaphor I think means this. It's, talking about their girlfriend or whatever. That is only a level 3 out of 4 levels of analysis. And if you are just getting to that level, you're not going deep enough. You're not going to get to that 7 or 8 grade that you might want to. In order to really get a high score in the analysis portion, you need to take it to the next level. And what that means is you need to talk about the impact. How do those devices, like how do the metaphors, impact the overall message of the song? How do they impact the listener in general, like the general audience? And then how do they impact you maybe? And this is where you have to start making some big connections. And there isn't going to be an easy answer here. You're going to have to really think carefully and draw some conclusions. And I really encourage you guys to reach out to me during this process because it might be hard. You might think that you're on the right track and you might not be going deep enough. So let's take a look at some slides to walk through this. And please ask any questions along the way as we go, because there will be a lot of questions. So this whole unit, Unit 4, is persuasion and rhetoric. And the word rhetoric simply means symbolic, persuasive communication. And pretty much anything can technically fall in the definition of rhetoric. I'm going to be sending you guys an article that you're going to need to read. This will be the little formative task that I was talking to you about. You'll have to read this article and then answer some quick questions about some of the terms and what it means. So I'll be sending that out today. Rhetoric has a really long history. It goes back thousands of years to the days of Aristotle. People were doing this way before Aristotle, but he was the first person to really write about rhetoric. And that's kind of why we look at him as the father of rhetoric. And what he observed is that when people were trying to persuade each other, a lot of people wanted it to just be based on logic and observable data, or in other words, logos, which would be the Greek word for logic. However, persuasion is not 100% logical. Think about the things that you have just eaten this week. Some of you have probably eaten some chips and some energy drinks and some snacks and cookies and crackers and all kinds of delicious, awesome things. Now, we know research has told us that sugar is not good for us. We know that high amounts of caffeine are not good for us. We know that energy drinks are not good for us. We know that loads of carbs are not very healthy for us. And yet, we still can't help but shove that cinnamon roll into our face and chase it with our Red Bull. So we know that logic alone is not persuasive enough. So Aristotle also looked at other things. He identified 2 other pieces, which you're probably familiar with. Ethos, which is the Greek word for ethics. And what that really means in terms of our understanding now is the credibility of the speaker or the credibility that the speaker uses. So quoting other well-known individuals or using their own credentials if they've done a study. We do tend to believe people who we perceive as having more knowledge than we do. And so that ethos part is another way that we can be persuasive. And then the last piece is pathos or pathos, which is the Greek word for passion. But in this context, what it really means is how we appeal to our emotions. And when it comes to snacks, we are far more persuaded by our emotions. We eat the snacks that are bad for us because they are delicious and they make us happy when we eat them. And not very many other things will persuade us to avoid those snacks until we get to a point where the emotional scale is out of balance. So most people choose to stop eating those things when they start feeling badly about their appearance or their health or how they feel. But usually that piece has to come first before any of the logic will fall into place. So that is a lot of what we were going to talk about at the beginning of this unit when we were talking about persuasion, but since we don't have time to do all that, we're jumping ahead a little bit to rhetorical criticism. Rhetorical criticism is the ability to look at something else and to pick out those pieces and talk about how those things impact an individual in a persuasive way. And you might be thinking like, well, music isn't persuasive, but I am going to show you that it is. The words in which we choose to listen to help us build connections. Sometimes those are logical connections, maybe because we have had a similar experience to the story that the song is talking about. Sometimes it's an emotional response. That song, whether it's the lyrics or the music or the artist or whatever it is, makes us feel something, okay? And then the last piece is the ethos. Sometimes the band has a credibility, or the genre carries a credibility, or something else about maybe the historical background of that song carries with it some credibility, and we feel connected to that. We want to believe it. We're like, yeah, I get what this band is saying, or I get what this genre is talking about. I agree with that. So we're going to talk about persuasion and rhetoric in the terms of music, which is really awesome because most people listen to some kind of music. So let's jump into this. We talked a little bit about rhetoric here just for a moment, but what exactly is rhetorical criticism? Well, essentially, it's the ability to analyze messages that are directed to us. Now we're going to use music for our assignment, but you can do this with all kinds of things. You know, all that crap on social media, all the memes, all the misinformation, all the confusing stuff about politics and the world and everything. You can use these tools to analyze those messages, figure out, number one, is this persuasive to me? Number two, why is this persuasive to me? And then number three, do I want to believe the message that's being directed at me? And those are really important real world things, which is why I decided to continue with this awesome, fun final speech instead of having you guys do a traditional persuasive or argumentative speech, because I feel like most of you probably at least have some concept of how to craft a persuasive message. A lot of you are probably really good at this with your parents. Some parents, you just know how to work them over, right? Some parents, all you need to do is distract them and they're like, yeah, whatever, do whatever you want. Some parents, the guilt trip works, that emotional thing works, right? Sometimes it's the credibility. Well, Ben, he's going to go to the movies and you guys love Ben, so you should let me go to the movies, right? Whatever it is, you guys know how to craft some persuasive messages, but we aren't always very good at breaking down persuasive messages that are directed at us. And this is a really, really important skill. So that's another reason why I decided to do this assignment as opposed to the traditional persuasive or argumentative speech. So the other piece to rhetorical criticism is the ability to break down pretty much anything. We call them artifacts, but this can be pictures, it can be ads, it can be articles, it can be memes, whatever it is, to also discover the underlying messages. Because y'all know, if you've ever seen a political ad or meme or read a tweet, you know that there are underlying messages and underlying things. It's more complex. This also helps you to understand the connections that those messages might have to different people and the impacts that those messages might have. So you might be reading a tweet and you might be thinking, why is anyone buying into this crap? Well, by learning to do this process of breaking it down, you can at least start to understand a little bit more why somebody might be buying into that message. And it also allows you to look at messages from a micro perspective. So we're really, really, really getting narrow, getting deep, deep, deep. So when we critically analyze things, it makes us way better communicators because, as I mentioned already, it improves our ability to filter things, to filter through all the garbage that's out there, and to also find meaning in messages and understanding. And it definitely helps me a lot in just having empathy and understanding for people who have different ideas and opinions than I do. Because if I can at least understand like how they got to that conclusion, that makes it a lot easier to have those conversations. And that understanding can go a long way to kind of bridging that gap a little bit. And it also helps us broaden our concept of persuasion, and it gives you guys the tools to read more critically, to listen more critically, and just understand like this broad world of rhetoric and persuasion and politics. Now, because rhetoric is so old, it also has had some pretty negative reputations over time, and it still carries a lot of negative connotation because people will often use the word rhetoric when they talk about politics, and they'll say things like, oh, it's just rhetoric or whatever, which usually implies that the person speaking is just using big words with nothing behind it. While that is not the true intent of rhetoric, it certainly has been used that way. So it can be used for good or evil. It can be used for a lot of different forms of persuasion, and understanding how to break it down is going to really help you so much. So as I mentioned before, there are 5 considerations. So when you get ready to do your speech, you know, a piece of paper right here, you're gonna have your blank paper. Well, you know what, I can write, I can annotate on here. Okay, so here is my pretend speech outline. So the first thing that you're going to always include is your intro, and within that, you know, you need to have an attention getter, a preview, and a thesis. And then in the body of your speech, you're going to include these 5 considerations, and you can put them in whatever order that you want. And in fact, I would encourage you to put them in order that emphasizes the strongest considerations first. So when you start looking at the song that you have chosen, you're going to notice that some of these considerations, there's just more information. So let's take linguistic set again. If you choose a song that doesn't have any lyrics, that's probably going to be a pretty small consideration. And so, you might want to have that one last or later on. But if it has like a lot of historical backdrop, then you might want to have that one first. So you will decide how you're going to do the order. So immediate context, historical backdrop, linguistic set, audience perspective, and then meeting ethos. And then you're going to have a conclusion. And your conclusion is going to have a review and a closing statement. I don't know why I put it back there, but whatever. So this is essentially what your speech is going to look like. And I'm going to send you guys, like I said, a bunch of resources. I'm going to send you a skeleton outline. I'm going to send you some documents that talk more about the 5 considerations. It will give you questions that you can use to answer in each of the 5 considerations to help get your brain going. There's so much stuff here, and we're shrinking this down to like a tiny little like 5-minute speech essentially. And so it's okay if you feel a little bit overwhelmed. Please use the tools that I am going to give you. So that little thing. Okay, so I'm going to start by just giving you like a big overview of the 5 considerations. Then I'm going to send out some resources. And then if you guys have questions, please reach out to me, because you are going to need to take some time with each of these. So historical backdrop really looks at why the song was written. And we don't always know why the song was written. You guys do not need to do any additional research for your speech. I don't need to know when the band was formed. I don't need to know how many members there are in the band. I don't need to know anything that is irrelevant to the song, okay? If there's something about the song that talks about the band getting together or how many people are in the band, then sure, you can talk about that. But other than that, I don't need any of that demographic information. If you don't know why the song was written, you don't need to go and research it, because I'm going to talk about why knowing the historical backdrop can be important, but also why not knowing the historical backdrop is important. And I'm going to show you how you can use both of those perspectives in your speech. But if you do know why,
I just have a quick.
Yeah, go ahead, Everett.
So if the song has a very it's got like the historical background to it is very important, should we include a larger historical backdrop section into it?
Maybe. There's a lot of choice when it comes to this. That's a great question. I'm going to give you guys some examples of different songs. And yeah, I think if the historical backdrop has a strong connection to you, or you think it has a strong connection to the audience, then you might want to make that a larger portion of your speech, Everett. But you don't have to, because there might be another consideration that's even more impactful. When you guys start going through this, every time you look at a consideration, I want you to almost look at it as its own little thing. And I want you to constantly be thinking, what is the impact of this consideration? Why do we care about this consideration? Why would regular people care, or why do I care? How does this impact me? How does this impact other listeners? So take a song like Another Brick in the Wall, originally by the band Pink Floyd. There was a cover done by Torn that I think is really good. This song has a lot of historical backdrop because the artists wrote it about a family member, I think it was their dad or their grandpa, who fought in World War II. The song wasn't released until the 70s though, and so a lot of people connected it with the Vietnam War. And now with when Korn redid their version, I can't remember what year it was, but a lot of people could also make the connection with like 9/11. So there's all these different connections, right? And those are all valid connections that a person could make to the song. Knowing that the band made the song based upon a family member who fought in, I think it was World War II, is awesome. And if that makes the song more impactful for you as a listener, then talk about that. But if you got a different connection, that's okay too. So the challenge that you guys are going to have with this assignment, it's both a blessing and a curse. It's awesome because you're going to have a lot of flexibility and freedom in talking about the impacts of each of these 5 considerations, but it can also feel a little overwhelming. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, please reach out to me. We can set up a one-on-one Zoom. I can go through your song with you. I can help you find those guiding questions as you go through. Again, we want to really focus on this third question. Does this affect the message? Does it make it more or less persuasive or more impactful? And what if I don't know why the song was written? That's okay. Not knowing why the artist wrote the song is equally as important for a couple of reasons. One, it allows you as the audience member to kind of experience the song in the vacuum, in a vacuum. And so it's probably going to make audience perspective more important as far as the 5 considerations go, or it might make one of the other considerations more important. It allows you to put your own interpretation on the song, which is a positive thing that a lot of artists do, especially if you're a fan of like alternative music. A lot of our alternative music is purposefully vague because it allows the listener to impose their own experiences on top and make their own interpretation, which actually creates a stronger connection between the listener and the song. And it also allows you to focus on other elements like the lyrics or the melody or something else. So there are a couple of reasons why not knowing why the song was written is fine. And to be perfectly honest, not every song that an artist writes has this huge in-depth story. Think about some of the common life experiences that we share, you know, relationships, love, heartbreak, anger, frustration, depression, anxiety, drug addiction. While we may not as individuals all experience all of those things, those are definitely things that impact a lot of people's lives. And so an artist might just pick a theme and write about it, and it doesn't have like this huge specific story behind it. And that's okay too. All right, let's talk about immediate context. So context is everything that surrounds something else. So in this case, we're looking at other tracks on the album. If there was a specific event around the time the song was released, this could connect back a little bit to historical backdrop. This also has to do with the specific elements in the song. For example, the lyrics versus the melody. Take like 90s punk music. A lot of bands like the Beastie Boys, and then moving on into the 2000s, we have bands like Panic at the Disco. Music like that often takes these very heavy, depressing lyrics and plasters it on top of a super upbeat, happy sounding vibe, which creates this really interesting dissonance or disconnect that makes the listener stop and really think about those two things. It's like this opposite effect, which is really interesting. So you could talk about that. This would also be an appropriate time if you wanted to. If there was a music video, you could talk about the music video. However, I want to just put a little caveat. I don't want you analyzing the music video as a whole. I want you analyzing the song. However, I know that a music video can change the way that we interpret a song or the connections that we make with a song. So this would be an appropriate place to talk about if your song has an accompanying music video. Also, this would be the appropriate place. If you are choosing a song from like a video game or an anime or a movie or a musical or a play or something else that isn't like a sort of mainstream radio music sort of song, this would be the appropriate place to talk about that as the immediate context. So if I'm choosing a song from like the musical Hamilton, not only is the song itself very impactful, it's going to have some historical backdrop as well as a bunch of other cool stuff, but the fact that it's in a musical and it lands at X place and time in the play, and it's preceded by all this story here, and it is right before all this story here, that is a huge part of the immediate context. So this would also be the appropriate place to talk about that. Maybe you choose a song that's like the theme song from an anime. That being part of the anime and existing in that realm is part of that immediate context. That anime or that play or that movie or whatever it is, that video game, in fact, provides that context. So sometimes when I'm like wanting to relax, I will turn on some music